It's your first time on 2b2t, and you're escaping spawn on one of the major overworld highways, until you find this. An enormous, highly detailed structure made from obsidian. But what does the existence of this structure, or should I say structures, mean? After all, there's actually 4 of them, with each being on every major overworld highway 10,000 blocks out from 0, 0. Why would someone even attempt to build something this grand so close to spawn? So how about I tell you the story behind these incredible 2b2t structures known as the 10K spawn monuments. To fully understand why these monuments exist, we first need to take a step back to 2019, where our story begins. An avid builder by the name of King Aurelius had an idea to create something near spawn that represented his group, the Last Templar, which I happen to be a member of. At this point, we had already completed a total of 4 massive obsidian crosses at each 6K diagonal access road. They were impressive in size, but simple in nature. So for this time, Aurelius wanted to accomplish something much, much greater. So he started looking for inspiration, and quickly remembered Wrath Outpost, built by Pyrobyte in 2015 during the 3rd incursion as a base of operations. For years after, the build became an icon, awed by many, and remarked as being one of the most beautiful structures ever built in the 2b2t spawn region. But in his eyes, it couldn't be the only one. It was decided that a new monument would be built near spawn to honor the 1-year anniversary of the Last Templar. The design was first sketched out on paper, with many aspects inspired by this Icelandic church that I can't pronounce. And just like the Wrath Outpost, obsidian was the block of choice to ensure that the build would withstand the test of time. Next thing to do was to find a location to build it. It was eventually decided that 10,000 blocks out on the Positive X overworld highway would be the ideal spot so it can be seen by passersby, yet far enough from spawn to avoid immediate griefing. So the area was cleared out, and on September 28th, 2019, construction began. The goal was to build the entire thing that evening to reduce the risk of potential griefers infiltrating the project. And with 8 of us, it took just 4 hours to place over 100,000 obsidian. We quickly took a group screenshot, and Aurelius made a post on the 2b2t subreddit showing off the build. After that, we all received a much needed night's rest. The next morning came, and we woke up with the Reddit post receiving hundreds of upvotes and positive comments admiring the build's architecture. The creation of this monument did exactly what it was intended to do: bring attention to our otherwise mostly unknown group. Not only did many new players apply for membership into the Last Templar because of it, but FitMC would eventually make a video where he traveled the Positive X overworld highway, with the build not only being showcased in the video, but also appearing front and center on the video's thumbnail. In the end, the project was a success, and that's when Aurelius decided to build more of them. A year later, the group started work on the 2nd year anniversary monument. This time, it would be built on the opposite side of spawn, the Negative X highway. The design was based off an Aztec temple, and would have 2 peaks representing 2 years of the Last Templar's existence. Just like the first monument, it only took the group that night to complete, even though the build contained over 25,000 more obsidian than the last, not to mention all the beacons that were in the build. But little did we know at the time that the first and second monuments would be cakewalk compared to what was to come for next year's monument. When it was time to build the 3rd year monument, the group decided that it would be built on the Positive Z highway, which put us in a unique situation as we now had the Southern Canal to deal with, so the build would have to be designed to allow the canal to go directly through it. This monument would be absolutely massive compared to the last 2, stretching 252 blocks wide. It would have been impossible to build this in a day like the others. Just clearing out the land alone took the group multiple weeks. So this time, we had no choice but to take a chance on the griefers destroying our build in the process. We also had to worry about storing our materials close to the build, yet securely enough so random players wouldn't find them. And that's when one of the members, Lazy Boy, had an ingenious idea. Directly next to the build, there happened to be an enormous cobble monster. It was so large in fact that if chests were placed in the center of it, players would not be able to see them from the outside with chest ESP hacks due to 2b2t's render distance limitations. So that's where we ended up storing all of our building materials for the entirety of the build, and after clearing the land, construction began. At the time, we didn't have very much duped obsidian, so we had to resort to placing and breaking ender chests, which was tedious, especially given the fact that the build contained just over 200,000 obsidian, double the amount of the first monument, and due to the sheer size of the build and other miscellaneous factors, the construction spanned multiple months. So in between the times of us logging on to build, we would typically see some minor griefing here and there, but it was easy to clean up and continue building. After around 2 months, the build was finally complete. This time with the help of at least 12 players, with some of them being completely random people who were passing through that we recruited to help with the build. It was certainly my favorite build so far, but we still had one more to go. It was now time to build the final 10k monument, this time on the -z axis. Aurelius would design this build with elements from the last 3 monuments. For instance, the large doorways from the first, the square peaks with trees from the second, and the tall pillars from the third. The monument would also contain brand new features, like these 8 gigantic statues that almost reach world height, and of course, because this was the grand finale of monuments, it would be the largest. This build was going to be 280 blocks wide, with an astounding count of over 40,000 beacons and over 500,000 obsidian. That's more obsidian than the last 3 monuments combined. And yes, all of it was mined from ender chests. Now, even though this build was exponentially larger than the last, it actually didn't take as long to build, this time only 3 weeks rather than 2 months. This was mainly due to increasing the frequency we went online to build and reducing downtime. In those 3 weeks, we were building mostly every single day, until we finished. Guys, this build is insane! Just recording these cinematic shots is making my game lag just from the sheer amount of beacons contained within it. It's truly a sight to see, especially if you're a new player exploring the server for the first time. Just out of curiosity, I decided to return to the monument a day later, just to see if it got griefed yet. And it was perfect timing, because I caught a griefer right in the act. He literally placed the water bucket right in front of me, and the game started to lag. Then he logged off, but you can just see how much damage water and lava can really do. On that note, what actually happened to the other monuments after they were built? For the first one, it actually held up extremely well, until Fit made his video. That's when someone created a huge lava cast over top, but if you walk inside the build, you can actually see that the main structure is mostly intact. For the second monument, someone came a day after it was built to burn all the trees down, and over time, players started to take the beacons little by little until there was literally none left. Now I just wonder what those players did with all those beacons. The third monument has actually held up quite nicely since it was built. There were a few lava casts here and there, but none that really covered the entire build, simply due to the way it was designed. Even some of the beacons still exist. So that now brings up this question: why build all these monuments so close to spawn when they're just gonna get griefed? Well, when you play on 2b2t, you have to accept the fact that everything will eventually get destroyed, and when you build close to spawn, that reality is only accelerated. Every ruin on 2b2t tells a story, from the world being generated, to building, to destruction. So imagine yourself as a new player. You can only wonder, what was the story behind all this? And what might come next?